My name is Serena Calloway, and I want to tell you about the year everything I had carefully constructed my career, my dignity. My carefully maintained emotional walls came crashing down because of one woman, one stubborn, sharp-eyed, devastatingly beautiful woman who walked into my life holding a badge and a briefcase full of questions I didn't want to answer. But before I get to her, you need to understand what I had built, because you can't understand what it meant to almost lose it or what it meant to fall helplessly and completely for the person who was supposed to take it from me without knowing how much Calloway Creative meant to me. I was 26 when I started Calloway Creative from a studio apartment in Austin, Texas. I had a laptop with a cracked screen, $3,000 in my savings account, and an absolute refusal to work for anyone who didn't believe in what I believed in. I had just walked out of a corporate marketing job at a firm that shall remain nameless, a place where creativity was strangled by committee, where bold ideas die in conference rooms, and where I had watched my own spark slowly dim over 18 months of soul-crushing compromise. I couldn't do it anymore. So I quit on a Tuesday morning, drove home with my box of desk belongings and one deeply confused succulent plant, sat down on my apartment floor, and decided to build something real. Calloway Creative became a boutique creative agency branding, design, content strategy, digital campaigns. We specialized in working with women-owned businesses, LGBTQ+ entrepreneurs, and social impact organizations. We built brands that meant something. We told stories that mattered. In 7 years, we had grown from just me and my laptop to a team of 23 incredible people, a beautiful office in the South Congress neighborhood of Austin, and a client roster that made me proud every single day. I won't pretend it was easy. There were years where I paid my team before I paid myself. There were nights I slept on the pull-out couch in my office because I was too deep in a project to drive home. There were client pitches that went nowhere, proposals that died, campaigns that flopped. But there were also breathtaking wins, a rebrand that helped a queer-owned bookstore triple their revenue, a campaign for a nonprofit that raised over $2 million, a logo I designed for a woman-owned bakery that ended up on the cover of a national magazine. By the time I was 33, Calloway Creative was thriving, and I, Serena Calloway, the girl who had once cried in a bathroom stall because her idea had been shut down in a meeting, was someone people in the Austin creative community actually respected, maybe even admired. I had everything I had worked for, almost everything. The one thing I had quietly given up on was love, not dramatically, not bitterly, just practically. Dating had always been complicated for me. I was gay, openly and without apology. But the particular cocktail of my ambition, my intensity, my tendency to become consumed by work, and my deeply embedded difficulty with emotional vulnerability had made long-term relationships hard to sustain. My last serious relationship had ended 2 years prior when my girlfriend, Meyer, had told me gently but firmly that she felt like she was competing with my company for my attention, and that she was tired of losing. She wasn't wrong. I knew she wasn't wrong even as she said it. I just didn't know how to be any different. So I threw myself back into Calloway Creative and told myself, with the practiced ease of someone who has told themselves the same lie many times, that I was fine, that I didn't need what other people needed, that the work was enough. It almost was. Then the audit notice arrived. The letter came on a gray February morning. Official government letterhead, dense legal language, the kind of correspondence that makes your stomach drop before you've even finished the first sentence. Calloway Creative was being investigated for potential financial irregularities, specifically ALLHED misclassification of contractor payments that may have violated tax regulations. I read the letter 3 times at my kitchen counter, my coffee going cold beside me. Then I called my accountant, Elena, who confirmed what I already feared. This was serious. Not because I had done anything wrong, I hadn't. I was almost certain I hadn't, but because the investigation was real, the investigators were thorough, and the process was going to be long. invasive, and potentially damaging regardless of the outcome. The agency sending the investigators, a specialized financial crimes unit within the Texas Department of Revenue that worked in conjunction with federal tax authorities. They were, Elena told me, extremely professional and extremely thorough. She said extremely both times with an emphasis that communicated something beyond a compliment. I hired a lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia Osei, who had 20 years of experience in tax law and the energy of someone who had never once backed down from a fight. Together, Patricia and I prepared to cooperate fully and transparently with the investigation because I had nothing to hide. The contractor payments in question were legitimate. The classifications were correct. The documentation existed, but knowing you're innocent and proving you're innocent too. Investigators who are professionally skeptical of everything are two very different experiences. The lead investigator arrived on a Wednesday morning in late February. I was in my office doing a final review of some documents Patricia had flagged when my office manager, Bex, knocked on my glass door. The investigators are here, Bex said, her voice carefully neutral. Bex had been with me for 4 years and had the extraordinary ability to communicate entire emotional weather systems through tone of voice. Send them in, I said. I stood up, straightened my blazer, and told myself to breathe. Two people walked into my office. The first was a man in his 40s, stocky and pleasant-faced, who introduced himself as Agent Marcus Webb. He had a warm handshake and the practiced, calming energy of someone who had spent decades putting nervous people at ease. The second person was, Shivasi remember thinking, with the slightly absurd clarity of a mind reaching for something ordinary to hold onto, that she was unexpectedly young, late 20s, maybe 30 at most. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over dark trousers, her black hair pulled back into a low bun that was just slightly imperfect, a few strands escaping at her temples in a way that seemed less like carelessness and more like she had more important things to think about than absolute hair precision. Her face was composed and serious, with dark eyes behind glasses that had thin gold frames, and the kind of bone structure that made you aware of it without quite being able to explain why. She was, in short, stunning, and she was looking at me with an expression of complete professional neutrality that somehow managed to feel more penetrating than any scrutinizing look I had ever received. Agent Diana Reyes, she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm and brief. Lead investigator, not Agent Webb, who was older and whose name had come first. This woman, who looked like she belonged on the cover of an architecture magazine, was the one running the investigation into my company. Serena Calloway, I said. I've been expecting you. Something flickered in her eyes so quickly I almost missed it. That might have been amusement. I'm sure you have, she said. And so it began. The first 3 weeks of the investigation were, in the truest sense of the word, a grind. Agent Reyes and Agent Webb set up a temporary workspace in our small conference room, what my team had nicknamed the fishbowl, for its glass walls, and began the meticulous work of going through 7 years of Callaway Creative's financial records. My team handled it with remarkable professionalism. I had been honest with them. Investigators were here. It was routine. Nothing to worry about. Please cooperate fully and refer any questions to me or Patricia. They were nervous, of course they were, but they did exactly what I asked. What was harder for me to handle was her. Agent Diana Reyes was, professionally speaking, extraordinary. She had an almost preternatural ability to locate the one document in a 400-page file that required a clarifying question. She remembered details from conversations weeks apart and wove them together with quiet precision. She never raised her voice, never made accusations, never even implied anything openly. But her questions had a quality of careful architecture to them that made you feel like she was building something, brick by brick, that you couldn't yet see the shape of. She was also, I noticed in spite of my very best efforts not to notice, deeply warm when she wasn't in investigator mode. I caught glimpses of it the way she laughed with Agent Webb over something during their lunch break. A low and genuine sound that filtered through the conference room glass. The way she paused to ask Bex how her graduate classes were going, having remembered something Bex mentioned in passing 2 weeks earlier. The way she'd absently hum while reviewing documents, seemingly unaware she was doing it. I noticed too many things about Diana Reyes. That was the problem. Our one-on-one meetings, me, her, Patricia on speakerphone, a stack of documents between us, were exercises in professional tension. She would ask me something. I would answer precisely and completely. She would make a note. She would ask a follow-up. I would answer. She would look up from her notepad and hold my gaze for just a beat longer than was strictly necessary before moving to the next item. And I would remind myself, internally, firmly, that she was an investigator reviewing my company's finances, and I was a 33-year-old adult who was capable of maintaining basic professional composure. You classified these 12 contractors as independent contractors for tax purposes, she said one afternoon, tapping a document between us. But you provided them with equipment, company laptops, documented in their contracts, I said. Loaner equipment, returned at project completion. The contracts specify this. It's not unusual in creative industries. She made a note. And the non-disclosure agreements they signed, those were also standard for an agency that works with confidential client brand strategies. Yes. She looked up. You're not defensive about this. I have nothing to be defensive about. Something moved across her face, not quite a smile. But it's distant relative. Most people in your position are defensive regardless. I'm not most people, I said, and immediately heard how that sounded. I mean, I'm not approaching this defensively because the classification is correct and the documentation supports it. That's all I meant, of course, she said, in a tone that made me feel, somehow, that she had heard both things I'd said. I drove home the evening with my hands tight on the steering wheel and the distinct, unwelcome awareness that I was in trouble of a kind that had absolutely nothing to do with tax law. 6 weeks into the investigation, something shifted. It was a Friday evening. Most of my team had gone home for the weekend. I was still in the office. I was almost always still in the office on Friday evenings working on a pitch for a new client, a women's health nonprofit that I was genuinely excited about. I had assumed the investigators had left for the day. So when I walked to the kitchen to refill my water, I was startled to find Diana Reyes sitting alone at the small table in our kitchen break area, her blazer drape over the back of her chair, a cardboard box of files open beside her, and a to-go cup of coffee from the place down the street in her hand. She had her glasses pushed up on top of her head and was rubbing the bridge of her nose with her thumb and forefinger in the weary way of someone who had been reading small print for too long. She looked up when I entered, for a half second, before her professional composure snapped back into place. She looked caught, like I had seen something. I thought you'd left, I said, filling my water bottle at the tap. Agent Webb left. I wanted to finish reviewing the Q3 2021 records. She glanced at her watch. I lost track of time. It's almost 8. She blinked. So I hesitated. I had a whole policy internal, unspoken, firmly maintained about keeping every interaction with Diana Reyes strictly professional and impersonal. But she looked tired in a way that felt honest. And I was tired too. And the office was very quiet. And my policy, it turned out, was less robust than I had believed. There's a decent Thai place 3 blocks from here that delivers until 10, I said. If you're going to keep going. She looked at me carefully. That would constitute accepting something of value from a subject of investigation, she said, which is not permitted. I was going to order for myself and mention the restaurant's name, I said. If you independently chose to call the same restaurant and order your own food, that would be 2 separate transactions that happened to occur in the same kitchen. Silence. then the slow, reluctant bloom of what was unmistakably a real smile. The first one I had ever seen on her face directed at me. It did something to my chest that I was entirely unprepared for. That is a remarkably creative interpretation, she said. I run a creative agency. She laughed, quiet and genuine, the same laugh I had heard filtered through conference room glass. Up close it was worse. I mean better. I needed to focus. Pad Thai, she said. If the restaurant you're thinking of has it, they do. We eat at opposite ends of the break room table with a box of financial documents between us. And we talk carefully at first, in the way of two people who have been nothing but professional with each other for 6 weeks and are uncertain how to be anything else. But the evening was quiet and the food was good, and we were both, I think, simply too tired to maintain full armor. I learned that she had grown up in San Antonio, the daughter of a Mexican-American father who was a high school history teacher and a Filipino mother who was a registered nurse. She had gone to Austin on a scholarship, studied accounting and pre-law, and found her way into financial investigations because she said this in the matter-of-fact tone of someone reporting a simple truth. She was annoyingly good at finding things people tried to hide. That must be an interesting skill at parties. I said, I don't go to many parties. She said, neither do I. I admitted. She glanced at me over her glasses. She had put them back on to read something with an expression I couldn't quite decode. Then she looked back at her document. I drove home the night with the distinct sensation of having made a serious error in judgment. Not because anything had happened, because of how much I had wanted something to happen. In March, Callaway Creative turned 7 years old. This was, in our office culture, a significant event. We didn't do birthdays in a small way. My team, led by our events-obsessed project manager Talia, had organized an office celebration for a Friday evening catered food, a customized playlist, a slideshow of our best work from the past year, and the kind of warm, genuine celebration of shared achievement that reminded me exactly why I had built this particular team. I almost canceled it. The investigation was still ongoing, nearing its 8th week, and the idea of throwing a party in the same office where investigators were reviewing our finances felt strange. But Talia made an argument I couldn't counter. The team had been anxious and stressed for 2 months. They needed this. They deserved it. The celebration was real, the achievements were real, and I was not going to let an investigation, one that I maintained would clear us completely, steal that from them. Invite the investigators, she said, with the casual audacity that made Talia indispensable to me. Absolutely not. I said, they're here every day. It's weird to have a party and not acknowledge them, Talia. It'll seem like we're hiding something if we kick them out for the night. That was, irritatingly, a reasonable point. The last thing I needed was for Diana Reyes to note in her file that Callaway Creative had excluded investigators from an office event. So I stopped by the conference room, the Fishbowl, on Thursday afternoon and extended a professionally casual invitation. Agent Webb accepted immediately. With the warm enthusiasm of a man who genuinely liked people, Diana Reyes looked at me for a beat. In that particular way she had that made it impossible to tell what she was thinking. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, she said. I'm inviting you. I said, you wouldn't be making me uncomfortable. I was lying. But I was lying with complete conviction, which I had found to be the most effective kind. She came. The party was everything my team needed it to be: loud and warm and joyful, full of inside jokes and honest toasts, and the kind of laughter that lives in the bones of a company that genuinely loves what it does. Agent Webb fell into easy conversation with our head of strategy prior and ended up on the dance floor by 9 o'clock, which was a delight to witness. Diana Reyes stood at the edge of things, nursing a glass of sparkling water. She had declined the wine and watching the room with the expression of someone who finds other people's happiness genuinely interesting without quite being able to participate in it. I knew that expression. I had worn it myself at every party I had ever attended. You look like you've escaped to the observation deck, I said, appearing beside her. I feel like the observation deck is where I'm supposed to be. She said, at a party, at most things. I looked at her profile, the clean line of her jaw, the way the warm overhead lights caught the gold frames of her glasses, and felt the specific, low-grade ache of recognizing someone. Me too, I said. I built this entire company partly to have somewhere I actually wanted to be, and somehow I'm still always the one standing at the edge of it. She turned and looked at me, and there was something in her eyes, something open and surprised, as though I had said something she hadn't expected. That's a very honest thing to admit. You'd think, in my position, I'd be better at dishonesty, I said, given the current circumstances. She almost smiled. Almost? You're not a dishonest person, Miss Calloway. Serena? I said, a beat. Serena, my name in her voice. I had to look away. Then Talia appeared at my elbow, flushed and beaming, with a truly dangerous gleam in her eye. We're playing truth or dare, she announced. Absolutely not, I said. You literally always say that and then you always play. This is different. I glanced at Diana, who was listening with her head slightly tilted. Guests, Talia finished cheerfully. Exactly. Which makes it more fun. Come on. Everyone's sitting down. What I should have done. Held firm, maintained professionalism, found a graceful reason to redirect the situation. What I did, make brief. Helpless eye contact with Diana Reyes, who raised one eyebrow, an expression that I was beginning to realize was her equivalent of a full smile, and follow my team into the cleared space where they had ranged themselves in a loose circle on the floor and the available chairs. 7 of us ended up playing, me, Talia, our senior designer Mick, our content-led Jasmine, our copywriter Dev, Agent Webb, who was delighted, and Diana Reyes, who sat cross-legged on the floor in her blazer with her sparkling water, and the particular composed energy of someone who is very much paying attention. The game was, for the first several rounds, exactly as harmless as office party truth or dare is supposed to be. Dev admitted he had cried watching a dog food commercial. Mick revealed he had once mailed a strongly worded letter to a font designer. Jasmine dared Agent Webb to do his best impression of a runway model, and he delivered with such committed enthusiasm that we were all crying laughing. I managed 2 rounds without incident. Told the truth, I had once repitched a client idea they'd rejected by simply waiting 6 months and presenting it again as new, and completed a dare called the lobby of our building and asked, in a terrible accent, if they sold seashells. Then Talia, who is either a genius or a menace depending on the day, pointed at Diana. Your turn, she said. Truth or dare? Diana did not hesitate. Truth, of course, Talia said, not unkindly. Okay, tell us something about yourself that the people you work with don't know. Diana was quiet for a moment. The room was attentive in the specific way that rooms get when everyone can sense that something real is about to happen. I was a painter, Diana said, in college. Before I changed direction, I had a show, a small one, a student gallery, and someone from a real gallery came to see it. She paused. They offered to represent me. You're kidding, Dev said. I turned it down. She said. I was already halfway through my accounting degree. I told myself the practical path made more sense. A beat. I still think about that sometimes. The room was quiet for a moment, in the way rooms are when someone has said something true. Then Talia turned to me. Serena. Truth or dare? I should have said truth. I almost said truth. But there was something about the way Diana had just been honest, quietly and without defensiveness, simply handing over a piece of herself, that made me reckless. Dare, I said. Talia's expression told me I had made a significant tactical error. I dare you, she said, with the calm confidence of someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment, to kiss the person in this circle who you find most interesting. There was a beat of charged silence. Talia, I said. Those are the rules, she said, entirely unrepentant. I was aware, with absolute crystalline clarity, of every person in the circle. Dev grinning at his knees, Mick pretending to examine the ceiling, Agent Webb looking somewhere between amused and tactfully oblivious, Jasmine watching me with bright, knowing eyes. And Diana Reyes, who had gone very still, her sparkling water held in both hands, looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, an expression that had no professional composure in it at all. I could have deflected. I could have kissed Talia in the cheek, made a joke of it, survived the moment with dignity intact. I knew exactly how to do that. I had done that 100 times. But Diana was looking at me like that, and I was, as I think I have established, in serious trouble where Diana Reyes was concerned. I stood up. I crossed the 3 feet of office floor between us. I crouched down so we were at eye level, which put us very close together, and said, quietly enough that it was only for her, "Is this okay?" Her answer was not a word. It was the way she let out a slow breath, the way her grip loosened on her sparkling water, the way her chin tilted the smallest fraction of a degree upward. I kissed her. It was brief. It was soft. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, I felt something shift in my chest with the quiet, irreversible finality of tectonic plates. I pulled back. Her eyes opened slowly. For a full 2 seconds, we were simply looking at each other, and the room that existed around us could have been anywhere in the universe for all I was aware of it. Then Talia started clapping, which broke the spell, and the room erupted into the cheerful chaos of a group of people pretending they hadn't just witnessed something significant. Diana looked away first. She took a careful sip of her sparkling water. I stood up and somehow navigated the rest of the evening without further incident, though I could not have told you a single thing that happened in it. Diana Reyes arrived at Callaway Creative the following Monday morning at exactly 8:47 a.m., which was her standard time. She was wearing her professional armor blazer, trousers, glasses, hair in the low bun, and she greeted me in the hallway with a professionally neutral "Good morning, Miss Callaway," that told me, very clearly, that we were going to proceed as though Friday evening had not occurred. "Good morning, Agent Reyes," I said. And that was that. Except, of course, it wasn't. The thing about pretending something hasn't happened is that pretending requires active effort, and active effort produces its own kind of awareness. I was aware of her constantly, where she was in the office, when she left in the conference room, when her voice carried through the glass walls during a call, every time she appeared in a doorway or paused at a filing cabinet or stood at the window with her coffee. I was aware of it with a precision that was becoming genuinely inconvenient. I found, for the first time in my professional memory, that I was struggling to concentrate. Patricia, my lawyer, noticed. "You seem distracted," she said during our weekly check-in call, with the directness that I paid her to exercise. "I'm fine," I said. "The investigation is proceeding well," she said. "The documentation is holding up. I expect they'll be wrapping up their primary review within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Is there something specific that's worrying you?" "No," I said. "Everything is fine." It was not fine. I was 33 years old, and I had developed feelings for the woman investigating my company. This was, objectively, one of the least appropriate situations imaginable in which to develop feelings for someone. Diana Reyes could not be involved with me in any personal capacity while the investigation was ongoing. She had told me as much, tactfully but clearly, that very first day about the ethics of accepting things of value from investigation subjects. A relationship would be several orders of magnitude more compromising than a pad thai delivery. I knew all of this. I reminded myself of all of this regularly and rigorously. It did absolutely nothing to change how I felt. What I did instead, because I am, fundamentally, a practical person, was focus on the thing I could control, the investigation. I threw myself into complete cooperation and meticulous documentation. If Diana Reyes wanted a record, I would give her the most thorough and organized record anyone had ever produced. I would make the path to clearing Callaway Creative so unambiguous and well documented that the investigation would conclude correctly and decisively and as quickly as possible. Because once the investigation was didn't let myself finish that thought. Not yet. It felt like counting on something I hadn't earned yet. It was the 3rd week of April. The investigation had been ongoing for nearly 3 months. Patricia had told me that the end was in sight. They were finalizing their review, and the preliminary indication was that the contractor classifications would be upheld. I was working late again. It was becoming a habit. Or rather, it was reverting to a habit I had thought I had worked past. But the evenings, with the office quiet and the ordinary pressures of running a 23% agency at bay, were the only time I felt like I could breathe properly. I was sitting on the small sofa in my office. I had moved it so it faced the windows, which looked out over the South Congress rooftops, when I heard a knock at my open door. Diana. She was holding 2 cups from the coffee place down the street. I noticed your car was still in the lot, she said. She held out one of the cups. Oat milk latte. I asked your office manager what you drink weeks ago. I thought maybe someday. She stopped. This probably constitutes a conflict of interest. You're not on the clock, I said. You're off duty. I'm always on duty during an active investigation. Then why are you here? She was quiet for a moment. Then she came in and sat in the chair across from my sofa, setting both cups on the low table between us. The latte she handed me was the right temperature, warm, but not hot, like she had timed it for exactly this. The preliminary findings were finalized today, she said. I'm not supposed to tell you anything before the official letter, which you'll receive within 7 business days. Then don't tell me anything, I said. I'm not going to tell you anything, she said carefully. I just wanted. Tosh stopped again. This was the most I had ever seen her struggle for words, which was significant, because Diana Reyes was normally a person of precise and complete sentences. Diana, I said, and then stopped, because I had used her first name without deciding to, and it had landed in the room like a stone and still water. She looked up at me. The professional composure was gone, not eroded, not cracked, simply absent, the way a window becomes visible when the curtain is drawn back. I wanted you to know, she said carefully, that I have been as professional as possible for me to be throughout this entire process. I know, I said, and that the investigation has been conducted without any bias or compromise of any kind. I know that too. Good. She picked up her coffee. Didn't drink it, because there are things I would have done differently, she said to the cup, if the circumstances had been different. The office was very quiet. Outside, South Congress murmured its evening sounds. Like what? I asked. My voice was steadier than I deserved credit for. She looked up from her coffee at me, like asking you to have dinner with me, she said. The first day I came to this office, I breathed in slowly, then out. When this is over, I said. When this is over, she said. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. Then she stood up, straightened her blazer, and picked up her coffee. 7 business days, she said. At the door. I'll be waiting, I said. The official letter arrived on the 5th business day, not the 7th. Patricia called me as soon as she received her copy. Callaway Creative was cleared. The contractor classifications were upheld as compliant. The investigation was formally closed. No penalties, no further action, no asterisk of any kind on our record. I sat in my office with the letter in my hands and felt a wave of relief so large it left me momentarily incapable of doing anything except breathing. 7 years of building something real, and it was intact. My team was safe. Everything I had worked for was safe. Then I felt something else, a lifting of something I hadn't fully acknowledged had been pressing down. The investigation was closed. The professional barrier that had stood between Diana Reyes and me like a locked gate was gone. My team celebrated. There was champagne, actual champagne, the good kind that Talia had been holding in the office refrigerator with spectacular optimism, and it was real and beautiful, and I was genuinely present for it in a way I hadn't been for much of the past 3 months. But my phone was in my hand when I stepped out of the celebration for a moment into the quiet hallway. I had Diana's number. She had given it to me at the start of the investigation. Professional contact only for logistical purposes. I had never used it for anything else. I typed, asterisk it came today. We're cleared, asterisk the response came 3 minutes later. Asterisk I know. I heard this morning. Asterisk then, after a pause, asterisk congratulations, Serena, asterisk my name. Her first text to use my first name. I typed, asterisk you mentioned dinner. Asterisk another pause. Longer this time. Long enough that I held my breath. Then, asterisk I did mention that. Are you free Saturday? Asterisk I was free Saturday. I had not been less free for anything in years. Asterisk yes. Asterisk I wrote back. Asterisk where? Asterisk let me decide that. Asterisk she wrote. Asterisk I'll pick you up at 7. Asterisk I went back to the celebration. I drank my champagne. I laughed with my team. Genuinely and without reservation. And underneath all of it, I felt the quiet, specific electricity of something about to begin. She picked me up at exactly 7, which surprised precisely no one who had been paying attention for the past 3 months. She was wearing dark jeans, a soft button down in deep burgundy, and her hair down for the first time I had ever seen it. It fell to just below her shoulders, with a natural wave that made her look both softer and more herself than any version of her I had seen in the office. Her glasses were the same gold frames, but without the blazer and the badge and the briefcase. She looked like someone who had stepped out from behind something she had been standing behind for a long time. You look different, I said. Good different, or unsettling different? Good different, I said. Very good different. The smallest smile. You too? I had worn a dress simple, dark green, a choice that had taken me 45 minutes and 3 outfit changes to arrive at, which I intended to share with no one. She had chosen a restaurant I'd never been to, a small Mexican place in East Austin, family-owned and clearly beloved, with murals on the walls and a menu handwritten on a chalkboard and the kind of ambient warmth that comes from a space that knows what it is and makes no apologies for it. I've been coming here for years, she said, settling into the booth across from me. It's not impressive. It's just real. I love real, I said. She looked at me with a small, considering tilt of her head. I know, she said. That's one of the things I noticed about you early on. What else did you notice? I'm not sure I should tell you all of it at once. That's very strategic for someone who's no longer investigating me. Old habits, she said, and smiled fully this time, openly. And it rearranged something in my chest. We talked for 3.5 hours. I know this because I looked at my phone at some point and did the math, and then put my phone back in my bag and decided not to care. She told me about growing up between her parents' cultures, her father's warm, sprawling Mexican-American family in San Antonio, her mother's quieter, more formal Filipino heritage, and the beautiful complexity of navigating the space between them. She told me about the paintings she had stopped making after college and had recently, very recently, started again small works. Nothing serious, she said, in a tone that suggested they were very serious to her. I told her about the studio apartment and the cracked laptop and the absolute blind conviction that had driven me to build Callaway Creative Realm. Nothing. I told her about Meyer and the relationship that had ended because I had prioritized my company over my love life so consistently that eventually there was no love life left to prioritize. I told her about the loneliness I had gotten so practiced at not noticing that I had almost stopped knowing it was there. She listened the way she did, everything with complete and present attention. No distractions, no performance, just genuinely there. What changed? She asked. You said you had almost stopped knowing the loneliness was there. Almost. I looked at her across the table. Someone showed me what it felt like to be really seen, I said. Even when the circumstances were extremely inconvenient. She held my gaze for a long moment. The circumstances were extremely inconvenient, she agreed. And yet here we are. And yet here we are. She said softly. We went to dinner again the following Saturday, and the one after that. By the 4th weekend, it had become a quietly established pattern dinner on Saturday, usually at the East Austin restaurant though twice we tried other places. And once we abandoned our dinner reservation entirely to walk along the trail by Lady Bird Lake until almost midnight, talking without running out of things to say. She was, I discovered, the most interesting person I had spent extended time with in recent memory. Not interesting in a performed way, she wasn't particularly interested in performing, but she had the quality of someone who had thought deeply about many things and was genuinely curious about thoughts that differed from her own. She pushed back on my ideas carefully, precisely, with a kind of respectful disagreement that I found, to my genuine surprise, invigorating. I had been surrounded by people who agreed with me for several years. Running a company will do that. Diana Reyes did not agree with me automatically about anything, and it was wonderful. I also learned the texture of who she was in the smaller things. She was a morning person, genuinely and constitutionally, which I found both admirable and somewhat baffling given my own nocturnal tendencies. She had a playlist she listened to when she ran early morning, 5 miles every day, that was entirely instrumental film scores. She had an older sister in Dallas and a younger brother who was finishing his medical residency in Houston. She had a cat named Theorem, which she named at 22 and still considered one of her better ideas. She was, under all her professional precision, a soft person. That was the truth that kept revealing itself slowly, the way a painting reveals itself when you let your eyes adjust. She was careful with people, genuinely careful, not as performance. She remembered things. She showed up, and she was, with me, becoming increasingly unhidden. The first time she took my hand, we were walking back to her car after a late dinner, and it was the most natural thing, her fingers finding mine in the dark. No announcement, no ceremony. Just the quiet certainty of two people closing a distance. I held on. She held back. The second kiss, the one that was mine to choose, freely and without witnesses and without game mechanics, happened on her porch 3 weeks after our first dinner. She had cooked this time, a dish her mother had taught her, rice and a slow-cooked pork that filled her whole apartment building stairwell with the most extraordinary smell. We had eaten at her kitchen table with Theorem stationed hopefully nearby, and afterward I had sat on her porch with a glass of wine watching the Austin sky, and she had come out and leaned in the doorframe watching me, and I had simply looked at her and reached for her hand, and she had come forward. Annie, don't have better words for what it was. I have spent a professional lifetime crafting language for other people's stories, and for this one, my vocabulary keeps falling short. It was tender and real and long, and when we finally parted, I pressed my forehead against hers in the dark and felt, with a certainty I didn't know I was still capable of, that this was where I wanted to be. Nothing real is without complications. I would be dishonest, and I have committed, in telling you this story, to being entirely honest if I implied that Diana and I simply fell into each other without difficulty. The complication was, in part, structural. Her work took her away. A new investigation, not mine, someone else's, pulled her out of Austin for 2 weeks in May. And during those 2 weeks, I discovered that I had become more accustomed to her presence than I had permitted myself to fully acknowledge. I missed her with a specificity and constancy that was new to me, not the vague longing of someone who is lonely in general, but the particular, pointed absence of a specific person, the absence of her. We texted, we called. She called me at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday from a hotel room in Dallas, and we talked for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with either of our work. And when I finally said good night, I lay in the dark for a long time, just feeling the shape of what was happening to me. I was falling in love with her. I had suspected it for a while. I had not admitted it to myself with that degree of directness until that phone call. That particular quiet Tuesday night. Falling in love at 33. After 2 years of telling myself the work was enough. After a carefully built life that left room for almost everything except this, it was disorienting. Not bad, but disorienting. Like being very good at navigating a city you've lived in for years, and then discovering an entire neighborhood you somehow never knew existed. The other complication was mine. and it was internal. I had, as I mentioned, a history of prioritizing my work over my relationships. Maya had told me this to previous partners before Maya had told me this in their own ways. I had heard it, agreed with it, and been unable to change it, which is a specific kind of failure that carries its own particular shame. With Diana, I did not want to make that mistake again, but wanting not to make a mistake and actually not making it are different skills, and I was significantly more practiced at the former than the latter. You went quiet, she said one evening, about 6 weeks after our first date. We were at her apartment. I had been staring at my phone, a client emergency, resolved now, but the residue of it still in my head. Are you here? I'm here, I said. Putting the phone down. You're here physically, she said. There was no accusation in it, just precision. I looked at her. She was cross-legged on her couch. There I am in her lap, watching me with that clear-eyed directness that I had fallen for in a conference room months ago. I'm sorry, I said. I know I do this. I'm not criticizing, she said. I'm asking. I know the difference. That's why I'm apologizing instead of defending myself. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. I want to be here. I'm working on the actually being here part. I know, she said. And then, after a pause, I'm not going anywhere. Serena, for words, simple as anything. I had to breathe through what they did to me. Tell me about the painting you're working on. I said. She studied me for a moment, then reached for her wine. It's a city, she said, an imaginary one. All the parts of places I've lived or loved range the way I'd want them to be. Can I see it? Eventually, she said, when it's ready. Is that a metaphor? Maybe, she said, and smiled. Everything is a metaphor if you look at it long enough. In June, Diana's sister Lucia came to Austin for a weekend. I was anxious about meeting her in a way I hadn't been anxious about anything personal in years. The professional anxiety of running a company I could manage, had built systems to navigate. The anxiety of sitting across a dinner table from someone who loved Diana and who would be forming opinions about whether I deserved to made me acutely, uncomfortably human. Lucia was nothing like what I had constructed in my anxious imagination. She was warmer than Diana in her initial presentation, quicker to laugh, more immediately expressive, and she had Diana's eyes and her mother's directness and a frankness that I found instantly disarming. Diana talks about you, she said, within the first 20 minutes of dinner, while Diana was in the restroom. Does she? I said, in a voice calibrated to reveal nothing more than she's talked about anyone in years. Lucia said, maybe ever. She looked at me with the specific, wing look of an older sibling. She's careful. You probably know that. She's very careful with herself. I've noticed, I said. So am I added. Careful with myself. I mean, we're both careful. We're figuring out how to be less careful together. Lucia's expression shifted, something that was not quite a smile, but was warmer than assessment. Good, she said. That's good. Diana came back and gave her sister a look that said, with eloquent telepathy, asterisk, what did you say to her, asterisk? And Lucia gave her back a look that said, asterisk, nothing important, asterisk, in the very specific tone of voice of someone for whom everything is important. I loved them both for it. The weekend solidified something. The meeting of a family member was, in the logic of how relationships build themselves, a threshold, one that Diana crossed simply by wanting me to meet Lucia, and that I crossed by showing up and being fully present and not retreating into the safe professional persona that had always been my emergency exit from vulnerability. I didn't retreat. I stayed, and a few weeks later, when Diana showed me the painting set up on an easel in her living room, the imaginary city in blues and ochres, and the particular kind of gray that Austin skies turn in late spring, I understood what she had been working on. And not just in the literal sense. The city in the painting had places in it I recognized. Not literally, they were abstracted, fragments of form and light, but I recognized what they were. A creative space, a kitchen table with dinner on it, a trail by water, a porch at night. Is this, he started. It's a lot of things, she said. Is some of it ours? I asked. She didn't answer directly. She came and stood beside me looking at it. And after a moment she took my hand. Some of it, she said, is where I want us to go. I said it first. Of course I did. Diana would have gotten there eventually, by the precise and deliberate route she took to everything that mattered. But I was always the more impulsive of us in the end. For all my careful professional infrastructure, it was a Saturday in July, a warm one, and we had spent the day doing almost nothing, the kind of day that is only possible when you are deeply comfortable with someone, when doing nothing together is preferable to doing anything anywhere else. We had gone to the farmer's market in the morning, and then come back to my apartment and made lunch from what we'd bought, and then sat on my small balcony reading. She had a novel. I had a design portfolio I was reviewing, and it was entirely ordinary and entirely wonderful. In the late afternoon she fell asleep on my couch, which she did sometimes on quiet days, briefly and without apology, theorem-like in her ability to simply power down when she was comfortable. I covered her with the throw blanket from the armchair and sat in the chair and watched her for a moment, her hair loose, her glasses folded on the side table, her face completely at rest, and felt something so large and unambiguous that trying to keep it inside any longer would have been physically impossible. She woke up a few minutes later, blinking, and looked at me. I love you, I said, just like that. No preamble, no strategic approach, just the bare, enormous fact of it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she sat up, pushed her hair back, and looked at me with those clear dark eyes. I know, she said. And then, because Diana Reyes was not actually incapable of the grand gesture, just uniquely selective about when to deploy it, I love you too. I've been trying to figure out the right way to say it for about 3 weeks. There is no right way, I said. Just saying it is the right way. Is that a creative insight? That's a human insight, I said. I'm working on those. She crossed the room and sat on the arm of my chair, which was not quite wide enough for both of us, but was made to work by proximity and willingness. She leaned her head against my temple. We're going to be okay, you know, she said quietly. Not a question. I know, I said, and for the first time in perhaps my entire adult life, I actually believed it. I am writing this in October. It has been 8 months since Diana, and I said I love you on my couch on a warm July afternoon, and nearly a year since the Truth or Dare game in my office produced, with deeply improbable efficiency, the beginning of the most important relationship of my life. Callaway Creative is doing well, better than well. We had our best quarter in company history this summer, and we just signed a partnership with the National Women's Entrepreneurship Foundation that I am genuinely thrilled about. My team knows about Diana now, has known for months, and their collective response, led by Talier, who has claimed full and unqualified credit for the Truth or Dare incident, has been one of warm, cheerful, entirely to informed celebration. Diana is still with the financial crimes unit, still doing the exacting, important work of finding what people try to hide, still arriving everywhere at precisely the time she said she would. She runs 5 miles every morning to her film score playlist. She visits Lucia in Dallas twice a year. She is teaching me, slowly and without pressure, how to look at her paintings, how to let a visual speak before trying to translate it into language. She is also, slowly and without pressure, teaching me how to be present. Not always. I still have evenings where the work pulls me under and I surface to find the evening gone. But I come back. I've gotten better at coming back. And when I do, she is there not because she has nowhere else to be, but because she chooses to be, which is a different and better thing. We moved in together last month. It was Diana's idea, which surprised me in the way that her genuinely felt braveries always surprise me. She is cautious with herself right up until the moment she decides to be entirely brave. And when she decides, she is unequivocal. I want to live with you, she said. One evening in September, over dinner at the East Austin restaurant that will always be yours. I want there to be one place we both go home to. I said yes. Obviously, I said yes. There was not a version of me that could say anything else. We live in a place that is bigger than her apartment and warmer than mine. with a room that gets good morning light that we have designated as her painting studio. Theorem has relocated with great dignity and requires tribute in the form of regular chin scratches, which I have been providing. I am not, it turns out, too old or too set in my ways or too defined by my work to build a life that has room in it for love. I have been proving this to myself every day for a year. I have been proving it by being present when I can and coming back when I drift and choosing every day consciously to let Diana Reyes matter as much as the company I built. She matters more. If I'm honest, not instead of it, I still love Callaway Creative with everything I have, but more. She matters more. The morning I understood this clearly was an ordinary one, a weekday in August, the kind of hot Austin morning where the air is thick before 7 a.m. and the light comes in gold and sideways through the windows. I was up first, making coffee, and Diana came into the kitchen in a t-shirt and her hair still unruly from sleep. And she stopped to look at something through the kitchen window, a bird, I think, or just the light, and I had this moment of such complete and complicated happiness that I simply stood there with the coffee pot in my hand and let it be. 7 years ago, I built a company because I believed in building things that meant something. I still believe that. I will always believe that. But I am learning, at 33 and in love for the realest time of my life, that the most important thing you can build is not the thing that makes you successful. It is the thing, the life, the home, the relationship that makes you whole. Diana found things I tried to hide, not in the way she was professionally trained to find things, but in the more important way she found the parts of me I had sealed off and convinced myself were better left unexamined. She found the loneliness I had gotten too good at not noticing. She found the softness I had wrapped in competence and ambition, because softness felt like risk. She found me, and then she chose to stay. For anyone listening to this who knows what it is to be afraid that you are too much of one thing and not enough of another, too ambitious, too guarded, to defined by what you have built at the expense of who you are, I want you to hear this. You are not too far gone. The walls you have built are not permanent fixtures. The right person will not be repelled by your complexity. The right person will be interested in it. I was investigated. I was cleared. And somewhere in the middle of those 3 months, without either of us planning it, without the timing being remotely convenient, I fell in love with the woman who was looking for what I had hidden. It turns out what she found was worth far more than what she was looking for. And that, truly, is the whole story, or the beginning of it. We're still writing the rest. Serena Callaway, Austin, Texas.